Did Michael Jackson have enablers? Hey everyone, I'm Roxanne and welcome back to my channel. Now, Michael Jackson has accrued quite a few accusers who've publicly made claims that the pop singer had sexually abused them in childhood. Since 1993, there's been Jordan Chandler, Gavin Arvizo, Jason Francia, the son of Jackson's former maid, Terry George, who claimed he met Jackson in 1979 at the age of 13, Michael Jacobs-Hagan, who claims he met Jackson in 1995 on his history tour, and then there's Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck. But of course, then they are the children we don't know of. Who knows how many more young boys the pop star may have victimized? Michael Jackson had full access to hundreds of children through the talent agencies he would use to hire children to perform with him, to his charity work visiting pediatric hospitals and orphanages, to the economically vulnerable children he would invite to his Neverland Ranch to enjoy the rides and amenities. I wouldn't be surprised if more grown men who interacted with the star as kids came forward. But did Jackson act alone? Or was there an intricate network of enablers that allowed the king of pop to become the worst and most prolific of predators?
Every time we were together, it happened.
What's wrong with sharing love?
Do you know how this looks to a lot of people?
With Michael, everybody knows he didn't have a childhood.
Michael was a child predator.
I have seen checks payable to the parents of these children.
Nothing happened, nothing.
You can just share your bed. It's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun.
How could this go on with so many people involved?
Do you still think that it's acceptable to share your bed with children?
I am not going to do anything sexual to a child.
Now, Michael Jackson was just one man, but there was an entire machine that worked behind him, filled with legal experts, investors, financiers, producers, managers, security, and a PR team that were responsible for what we, the public, experienced as the king of pop.
It just doesn't seem like him. He has too much of a good heart. And, I mean, he lets kids come over every day and he helps them out and stuff like that, so I don't think he did it.
There was an entire corporation financially backing Jackson's music, his record company, Sony, not to mention his endorsement deals with companies like Pepsi, LA Gear, and Suzuki. When Jackson made a career move, a corporate collective moved with him. And before the first allegations broke headlines in 1993, Jackson seemed to have the Midas touch and was the golden goose behind a lot of paychecks. In 1991, Jackson signed the biggest long-term contract with Sony Corp the music industry had ever seen, giving the star an unprecedented share of the profits from his next 6 albums. In the wake of his Dangerous album, Michael Jackson became Sony's billion-dollar baby, his estimated net worth at $230 million. From the success of his Thriller album in 1982 to the unheard-of record deal with Sony in the early 90s, there was no doubt about it. People who worked with Jackson knew it paid to keep the king of pop happy.
You have something within your records that everybody just loves.
Boy, I couldn't say. I just created it, and I'm honored that the public enjoy what I do.
But what was the main source of this happiness, and at what cost? Jimmy Safechuck's lawsuit claims that Michael Jackson and select few managing agents and employees of MJJ Productions and MJJ Ventures Inner Circle designed, developed, and operated what is likely the most sophisticated public child abuse procurement and facilitation organization the world has known. And I would even dare say this organization extended beyond MJJ Productions and Ventures employees. There were many people in Jackson's employment who were not part of his companies, namely Jackson's legal team and persons who worked for him as independent contractors. And virtually anybody who either at Neverland or on tour saw Jackson in the company of these children, knowing full well why he was in the company of these children, but who said and did nothing.
And what do you think was going on?
I have no idea.
I think you do.
Oh, you do? Well, whatever, Que sera, sera.
Lisa Marie Presley made a keen observation of Jackson's entourage when she was on Oprah in 2010 speaking about their marriage. She said that much like her father, Jackson was only in the company of people who told him what he wanted to hear. And if someone ever told him the truth, they were out.
They could have the kinds of people who were going to go with their program or not go with their program. And if they weren't, then they could be disposed of. Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you say something? Well, because if you did, you were out. It's very simple.
Then, of course, there was also his family, who LaToya Jackson spilled the beans and said Katherine Jackson knew exactly what was going on between Jackson and these boys and why Michael would splurge so much of his money on them.
She called him, excuse my expression, she called him an effing faggot. That's what she called him. And I said, Mother, don't say that.
LaToya is lying, and I'll tell her to her face she's lying. And she knows it.
It seemed in the world of the pop star, and to facilitate his taste for young boys, there were several moving parts. But the first of these moving parts I'd like to look at was Jackson's legal team. Now, among the lawyers working for Jackson at the time of the first allegations in 1993 was Bert Fields, Howard Weitzman, Carl Douglas, Johnny Cochran, and John Branca. Bert Fields was a business attorney who worked in the field of entertainment law. He came to work for Jackson in the early 90s, but he didn't represent Jackson alone. In fact, Fields represented several celebrities in Hollywood, including Tom Cruise and Harvey Weinstein, interestingly enough.
There is one name that strikes fear in the hearts of most powerful people in Hollywood. He is not an actor, he is not a director, he is not a producer. He is Bert Fields, one of the most successful entertainment lawyers in the country.
Fields also represented several major Hollywood studios, such as Paramount Pictures, DreamWorks, and MGM, and was considered a high-powered entertainment lawyer. Though Fields' specialty was in entertainment law, he did play a crucial role in defending Jackson when Jordan Chandler's allegations hit the media in August of 1993.
Which rumors? These rumors that you're... They're false. He's very hurt by them. That's a terrible thing. He didn't do it. It never happened. He's never done anything like that. And he just wanted me to get up here because Michael is shy. He doesn't like to get up and make a lot of public speeches. And he asked if I would get up and set the record straight. That's what I'm doing.
Of course he did. Michael Jackson was a high-prized corporate money-making machine, and it would be in Fields' own best interest to keep his multi-millionaire client safe from anything that could jeopardize his high earning power. Bert Fields came into the picture when Jordan Chandler's father, Evan, decided he would challenge his ex-wife, June, for custody of Jordy, who she was planning to take out of school so they could go with Jackson on the next leg of his Dangerous tour. Evan's suspicions of Jackson's intentions towards Jordy were aroused when he saw the two sleeping in bed together in the spooning position with Jackson's hand over top of Jordy's crotch. When Evan angrily told June that he wanted custody of Jordy and had lawyered up, June told Jackson, who in turn then told his lawyer Bert Fields to intervene. That's when Fields brought out the big guns to deal with the situation and hired private investigator Anthony Pellicano. Pellicano himself was a pretty sketchy character who had spent around 10 years in prison for wiretapping, racketeering, and weapons possession.
Tough-talking private eye Anthony Pellicano, a real-life gumshoe who saw himself as bigger than life, bigger than anything on the big screen.
I'm considered to be the highest priced and the best.
But apparently this didn't concern Fields. Pellicano and Fields met with June and Jordy's stepfather, Dave Schwartz, who had taped that infamous conversation with Evan Chandler, where he boasted he was going to win big time.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed.
Pellicano felt he could interpret Evan's recorded boast as an extortion attempt he was making on Jackson. He then went to Jackson's Century City condominium, otherwise known as the Hideout, and questioned Jordy alone for 45 minutes to find out if Jackson had done anything sexual with him. Jordy told him no, but keep in mind Jordy later attested that Jackson had told him if anyone ever found out about their relationship, Jordy himself would be arrested and taken to juvenile hall. So the King of Pop knew how to manipulate his victims into silence.
I spoke to him for approximately 45 minutes by ourselves. He absolutely said and denied that Michael didn't do anything inappropriate.
Pellicano eventually met with Jordy, Evan, and Jackson on August 4th at the Westwood Marquis Hotel, and later that evening heard through Evan's lawyer Barry Rothman for the first time that Evan was demanding a $20 million payout from Jackson.
A demand for $20 million was made and presented It was flatly and consistently refused.
Pelicano met again with Rothman and Evan on August 13th and offered Evan a $350,000 script deal. Of course, Evan refused. And in an effort to keep custody of Jordy from his mother, Evan then had Jordy tell the full extent of Jackson's sexual abuse to a psychiatrist, Dr. Mathis Abrams.
One night we were sleeping in the bed. I think it was in Neverland, and he just leaned over and hugged me. He hugged me. I thought nothing of it. He graduated to kissing me for a longer amount of time. We're on the lips, yes. After the lips, and he put his tongue in my mouth.
Who, as a mandatory reporter, had to report Jordy's allegations to the authorities, which then kicked off the catastrophic criminal investigation for Jackson.
Abuse charges against the pop star is widening. The sources say investigators have interviewed more than one child in the case, but there's no word whether they found any evidence against Jackson.
In the meantime, Anthony Pelicano was still hoping to pin extortion charges onto Evan and his lawyer Barry Rothman, seeing if he could get Rothman to admit to Evan's demand of $20 million.
You have told the police that two people were trying to extort money from Michael Jackson in return for kind of a blackmail thing, right?
I haven't had the opportunity to talk to the police yet.
The asking for money in return for not revealing something is not new in your field.
Not at all.
But the damage was already done, and police raided Neverland as well as Jackson's Century City hideout on August 21st, 1993. What I found disgusting was the way Pelicano and Burt Fields then made all the excuses in the world for why it was okay for Michael Jackson to sleep in a bed with little boys. According to Maureen Orth's investigative feature in Vanity Fair, Nightmare in Neverland, Pelicano made the defense, quote, "If it's a 35-year-old pedophile, then it's obvious why he's sleeping with little boys. But if it's Michael Jackson, it doesn't mean anything. You could say it's strange, it's inappropriate, it's weird. You can say all the adjectives you want to, but is it criminal? No. Is it immoral? No." And you can hear Burt Fields spouting the same madness in his interview with Brandon Ogborn for the podcast Telephone Stories.
Michael had almost no childhood. Michael had grown up. He was on the stage at 5 and never got off. He never really had any of the experiences that a normal child would have, because Michael was unusual as a person. He would often have boys on sleepovers the way kids do. When I was a kid, that was a big thing. I would spend a weekend at a friend's house, or a friend would spend a weekend at my house, and that was something kind of exciting to look forward to. But he was doing it in his 30s, and the boys were very young.
Pelicano would readily admit that Jackson shared his bed with young boys. According to Maureen Orth's article, he said, "If you hide something like that, then people are going to be even more suspicious." And my view of this whole thing is just to tell the truth. He did sleep in beds with little boys. There's no question about it. He's got a gigantic bed. And when it came to Jackson sleeping at Jordan Chandler's home for 30 days in a row, Pelicano went on to say, they invited Michael to stay there. Michael didn't crash their house. He didn't say, "I want to stay here." They wanted him to stay there. Fields went on to tell Orth how detrimental a criminal trial would be to Jackson. The stakes are going to jail and ruining his life, and his life is essentially over if he's charged and convicted. It was Pelicano who would later put both Wade Robson and Brett Barnes in front of TV cameras to say that they had slept in a bed with Jackson and nothing sexual had happened.
I know Michael very well. I know he wouldn't do anything like that.
Has he ever tried to do anything with you that would even be considered questionable?
No, nothing.
Nothing at all? Has never touched you?
Mm-mm.
Have you ever seen Michael naked?
No.
You gave interviews on TV defending Michael, right?
Well, we were sort of coerced to do that by Anthony Pelicano. Made really coerced.
Did you at the time feel coerced?
Yes. Yes, it's not easy to go on television and admit that you've allowed your son to sleep in somebody's bed, even though at the time I thought I knew how it appeared. Although I didn't think there was anything going on, I knew how it appeared.
But it later ended up backfiring on Jackson's defense, since just the idea of a 30-odd-year-old man sharing a bed one-on-one with a young boy had rung alarm bells for the public and news media.
From your standpoint, does it seem unusual for a 34-year-old man to have kids sleeping over?
You think for 1 second and you tell me what 35-year-old man is going to take a little boy and stay with him for 30 days and take another boy and stay with him for 5 days in a room and never leave the room? How many would take little kids and do that are 9, 10, 11 years old?
But Pellicano would go on to swear Jackson's ranch employees to secrecy and bar them from talking to the press. It's also alleged that he had Evan Chandler's home phone bugged and arranged for someone to rough him up at his office. Of course, he denied these claims, as well as claims he had sent death threats to hard copy investigative reporter Diane Diamond. But given what Pellicano had been convicted of in the past, I'm not sure it's beyond him to play dirty on behalf of his very wealthy client. Burt Fields went on to complain to the police commissioner that detectives were using intimidation and scare tactics with the children they were questioning.
Super lawyer Burt Fields accused the Los Angeles police of strong-arming young witnesses using, quote, such outrageous lies as "we have nude photos of you" in order to push the youngsters to make accusations.
And to add to the fray, 5 ex-bodyguards of the Jackson family filed a lawsuit claiming they were fired because they knew too much of Jackson's exploits with young children and had even been asked to destroy a photograph of a nude boy that was in the bathroom of the Encino home.
The security guards who are suing Jackson, claiming they were fired because of what they knew about the singer and young boys, are now accusing Michael's brother of being connected to a drive-by shooting aimed at one of the guards.
Fields called their charges bogus. Both Pellicano and Fields, however, would be criticized by those in Jackson's camp that they had mismanaged the scandal, making things even more incendiary for Jackson. Fields even letting it slip that a grand jury was about ready to indict the singer. Other such mishaps would eventually lead to their dismissal by December of 1993.
Okay, what is the status with you and the Jackson case now?
I have resigned.
Why?
That's personal.
Though Burt Fields would say he wasn't dismissed but chose to resign.
While I was feeling and saying, you can't pay these people off. There's no way to keep the payment a secret. I don't care what you say in the agreement, it's going to get out, and nobody is ever going to believe you ever again. Nobody's going to believe your innocence, because if you're innocent, why would you pay whatever it was, 20 or 35 million dollars? You just don't do that. You know, maybe you settle a case for 50,000 or even $500,000, but 20 million or 30 million? No. And he was definitely leaning that way, and I resigned. And that really was the extent of my involvement.
I don't buy that Burt Fields resigned.
Reporter Diane Diamond.
I know that he wanted to take this thing to trial. He wanted to fight Evan Chandler and the Jordy Chandler allegations, and then he, quote, resigned. I don't think so. I think the better scenario on that is that Michael Jackson hired a criminal defense attorney. Burt Fields was an entertainment lawyer. And I think Burt just got elbowed out of the way.
Johnny Cochran was then brought on and took the central lead in making the out-of-court settlement with the Chandlers. Cochran was highly recommended to Elizabeth Taylor as the best lawyer to represent Jackson during what had now become a media-frenzied debacle. Elizabeth Taylor, who I personally just consider to be another one of Jackson's enablers, hired Cochran and led the organization of a legal and PR team to steer Jackson through what was now a major career crisis.
While the search for Michael Jackson goes on in Europe, his world is coming apart.
Jackson said allegations that he molested a boy are untrue.
More now on Michael Jackson, the latest on the investigation into allegations of molestation.
The disappearance of Michael Jackson has taken on the elements of a farce.
Michael lives in a fantasy world, so maybe he did do something and thinks that he's untouchable.
Among those to work with Johnny Cochran were Sandy Gollin, a Hollywood talent agent and manager, Bob Jones, Jackson's spokesperson and publicity manager, Howard Weitzman, Jackson's criminal defense lawyer, Elizabeth Taylor's own lawyer, Neil Papiano, and a host of public relations specialists. Carl Douglas, a trial lawyer who was an associate of Cochran's law firm, had also been brought on to Jackson's team. Now, Douglas is finally someone who didn't hesitate to lay down the truth of what Jackson's defense team was up against and why they were nervous.
In our perspective, you got to remember that there was a companion criminal case or investigation going on by both the district attorney's office in Los Angeles and in Santa Barbara. There had been an occasion when Michael Jackson was examined and his genitalia was recorded, which was part of an investigation, and that was the 300-pound gorilla in the mediation room. We wanted to do all that we could to avoid the possibility that there would be a criminal criminal filing against Michael Jackson. And the reality was, we were hopeful that if we were able to quote-unquote silence the accuser, that would obviate the need for any concern about the criminal side. So from our perspective, there was a great deal of trust, not only with Johnny and Larry, because they had a 20-year prior friendship. There was tremendous trust with Johnny and the 3 judges being recommended, and we were facing the purple gorilla in the room of, if we don't get this case settled before March, there is a criminal investigation looming, and no one wanted to consider the implications of that as it affected Michael Jackson.
Jackson's public relations team was also quite busy, having the star make some opportune public appearances, such as at the NAACP Image Awards in 1994, where he made an impassioned speech declaring his innocence.
Everyone is presumed to be innocent and totally innocent until they are charged with a crime and then convicted by a jury of their peers. Because not only am I presumed to be innocent, I am innocent.
Shortly thereafter, Jackson would also host busloads of economically vulnerable, underprivileged children at the Neverland Ranch to come and enjoy the pop star's generosity.
He doesn't seem like him. He has too much of a good heart. And, I mean, he lets kids come over every day and he helps them out and stuff like that. So I don't think he did it.
I feel he's a very nice person, you know. All those accusations made, I don't think he did it, you know. I think he's a very nice person.
Of course, news camera crews were also strategically invited to watch the spectacle.
TV crews from Black Entertainment Television and a local LA station were the only ones allowed into the ranch to film this visit. His public relations team is in full swing. Jackson's top spin doctor, Sandy Gallen, was featured in this LA Times Magazine article over the weekend, staunchly defending his famous client and predicting that Michael Jackson will be exonerated. In the meantime, his handlers are expected to orchestrate more events like this one and carefully choose who is allowed to cover them.
But while Jackson's team was assembling their damage control strategy, some partners were jumping ship, such as PepsiCo, Jackson's largest endorsement contract. Once the Dangerous World Tour had been cut short and concluded, so also ended Jackson's endorsement deal with the soda company.
Michael Jackson, under investigation in California for the alleged molestation of a 13-year-old boy, has abandoned his Dangerous tour. Jackson issued a statement saying the pressure resulting from what he called false allegations, coupled with the energy necessary to perform on stage, left him exhausted, and he became dependent on painkillers.
My friends and doctors advised me to seek professional guidance immediately in order to eliminate what has become an addiction.
Jackson also made his appearance with his family at the Jackson Family Honors, which was a $6 million TV extravaganza televised on NBC. Needing the support of his family now more than ever before, Jackson made his appearance, though disappointing crowds when he refused to do a solo performance. But the shit show must go on, and Jackson continued making public appearances in the hopes of repairing his damaged public image. Meanwhile, the grand jury in Santa Barbara, California, began hearing evidence in the criminal case against Jackson.
Why are you seeking the gag order? No comment, guys.
Jackson's defense team was in court today trying to minimize the damage from a 13-year-old boy's civil suit. Larry Feldman is the boy's attorney, and this week he'll be taking sworn testimony from witnesses nearly every day. Those depositions will include some bombshells, and Jackson's people want it all kept quiet. Anthony Pellicano, the superstar's controversial private detective, is scheduled to be deposed, and so is this woman.
I saw these mothers taking these boys to the house, him sleeping with them for days.
She was Michael Jackson's personal maid, and she could turn out to be the most damaging witness yet. She's told her story to the police, to the district attorney's office, too. She'll repeat it under oath during depositions later this week. She's told authorities she saw shocking behavior between Jackson and young boys. Even more damaging, she's told the police she worries about her own son's involvement with the superstar.
With Los Angeles County District Attorney Gil Garcetti anticipating that the young Jordan Chandler would testify at the upcoming trial. Little did he know Jackson's legal team and Chandler's lawyer would reach a multi-million-dollar settlement that would silence Garcetti's key witness. Jackson continued his public campaign of magnanimity and attended the second annual Children's Choice Awards in New York to receive the Caring for Kids Award. A way Jackson would woo the world back to him was by presenting himself as a children's humanitarian.
And that's why I love children and learn so much from being around them. Today I would like to thank all the children of the world, including the sick and deprived. I am so sensitive to your pain.
How could such a person abuse a child when all they ever had were altruistic intentions towards the world's most vulnerable?
They're just trying to destroy his character, I think. Just make him look bad.
And a key person in constructing Jackson's philanthropic image was his longtime publicist, Bob Jones. When Jackson had hired Jones in 1987, Jones had already spent 17 years as a Motown Records publicist and had helped craft the images of Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, as well as Lionel Richie. But when working with Jackson, the pop star would have Jones deliberately manipulate the media with false headlines about the singer, such as Jackson sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber or wanting to buy the bones of the Elephant Man and other such eccentricities.
Do you think it's the case that he actually put all this stuff out there as a kind of smokescreen?
Oh, of course. Michael is a very clever person as far as creating. His whole life is tied up into building this image that's not necessarily true.
It starts with an oxygen tent that he sleeps in, except he doesn't really sleep in it, and he doesn't own one. He then buys the bones of the Elephant Man. No, that wasn't true either. Luckily for Jackson, the press begin to invent their own, communing with the ghost of John Lennon, or levitating as a form of relaxation.
I think Jackson knew exactly what he was doing in asking Jones to orchestrate these fake stories. Jackson knew that if enough falsehoods were leaked to the press about him, he could confuse the general public in deciphering fact from fiction. Michael Jackson molested a little boy? Nah, it's just as bogus as the Elephant Man story. With enough fake eccentric stories floating throughout the headlines, Jackson could then pass off real allegations as nothing more than tabloid junk.
Yeah, Wacko Jacko. Where'd that come from? Some English tabloid. I have a heart and I have feelings. I feel that when you do that to me. It's not nice. Don't do it.
But you are somewhat eccentric, to say the least. The way you dress, the way you look, it invites attention.
And Bob Jones knew this. Jones wrote in his biography of Jackson, The Man Behind the Mask, "I saw a mad genius in Michael Jackson, someone who toyed with people, a master of self-promotion and a self-destructive multimillionaire, trying to buy friendships and favors." Jones was unceremoniously fired by Jackson in 2004, but even after that, when testifying as a prosecution witness in Jackson's 2005 criminal trial, according to Stacey Brown, a journalist who helped co-author Jones's biography of Jackson, Jones still had a sense of loyalty to the fallen pop star and backed away from disclosing several shocking details which would have helped the prosecution's case. Brown told the Los Angeles Times he saw Michael and felt sorry for him. He couldn't go through with telling the truth, telling all he knew. But in Jones's biography of Jackson, he let it be known his own internal battle with what he saw of Jackson's behavior behind the scenes. It ate at me, time after time. Should I quit the job? But I had to remember a couple of things. For one thing, I was assuming Michael was doing something criminal with these young boys. Even today, I have no concrete proof. Sure, I'd see these boys go into his private quarters and stay for hours, days, weeks at a time. The parents of these boys would also see these bizarre scenarios unfolding, but they too said nothing. I had no real evidence. Furthermore, I couldn't afford to quit and become an outcast. Jobs for black public relations men in Hollywood are extremely scarce. I envisioned quitting and being blacklisted, not able to work, not able to eat, no employment benefits. When I expressed my concerns over his behavior to Michael, he angrily told me to mind my business. And when I was called to testify before the grand jury in the 1993 child molestation case, everybody wondered what I would say. Would I tell the truth? Hell yes. I wasn't going to jail for anyone, not even Michael Jackson. Michael had a sinister gift for identifying these boys. It was as if he had some sort of radar. I was continually amazed by how he could determine which of the many children he came into contact with might be wooable, whose parents could be bought off and counted on to keep quiet about what was going on. I came to understand that Michael manipulated people and events with a great deal of finesse. There was one kid, Louis Paulson, with whom Michael managed to carry on a clandestine relationship for years. Louis Paulson is a pseudonym, as will be the other names I give Michael's young friends throughout this book. Louis and his parents traveled with us around the world throughout 1988 and 1989 on the Bad Tour. Michael and Louis spent virtually all their time together. Timmy slept in Michael's room at night. In the afternoons, schedule permitting, in whatever exotic foreign city we were in, Michael would make chauffeur-driven cars available to Louis' parents for shopping sprees, entertainment, sightseeing, and other diversions, clearing the way for hours alone together with Louis in the privacy of his hotel room. In Paris, I told Michael, the press is going to start asking questions about all these little white boys you keep around. When I said that, he grew irritated and replied, "Who cares what they think?" Back in those days, Michael did take some pains to obscure the presence of his young companions. In 1992, we traveled to Africa, primarily to the Republic of Gabon, in what was billed as a goodwill tour. The truth was that the government of Gabon paid for Michael's visit. Michael didn't do goodwill tours. He always insisted on being paid, whether it was over or under the table. The King of Pop insisted that his every public appearance was to be a major event, so the media was teeming around us like ants on the morning we were to depart LAX for Africa. Michael's limo arrived at the airport, stopping first before it reached the media area. One of Jackson's security guards signaled me to come over to the car. I looked inside and there was yet another of Michael's little friends. Sitting next to Michael was Damon Patrick, a very cute boy. During this African trip, this boy's parents stayed home in Australia. Don't ask me how Michael managed to convince them to allow their child to travel halfway around the globe without them. But clearly my part of the job was to keep the kid out of the spotlight. We tucked him into a seat among the luggage. Michael got out of the car to great attention. Then the chauffeur drove the car to the other side of the plane, unloading the boy out of view of cameras. Guys, I think it's very obvious that the two boys Bob Jones is talking about in this passage is Jimmy Safechuck and Brett Barnes. Jimmy Safechuck, as we know, accompanied Jackson on the Bad Tour in 1988 and 1989 along with his parents. And of course, Brett Barnes is Australian born, and his mother, Marie Lisbeth Barnes, admitted in her testimony during the 2005 criminal trial that she had allowed Brett to travel with Jackson without her. And this is how hired hands enable an abuser, tucking the child among Jackson's luggage and sneaking him onto the plane while the press are distracted by the arrival of a megastar. This is just terrible. It really shows you just how many people are in on this, from the chauffeurs to the security to the publicists. And Jackson's lawyer, Bert Fields, also admitted to traveling with Jackson on tour and seeing these children with him. It seems that any adult who saw what was going on kind of had an intuition as to why Jackson had these boys with him, but nobody wanted to say anything because nobody wanted to lose their jobs. And we haven't even begun to get into the full list of Jackson's enablers. There's still Norma Steakhouse, Jackson's senior ranch manager, who's also been nicknamed the Madam of Neverland. And of course, there's also Jackson's own family, particularly Jermaine and Catherine Jackson, the loudest when it came to asserting their kindred's innocence. Anyway, let's get back to 1994 on the heels of the Jordan Chandler allegations. So Jackson's PR team was able to pull off some very opportune public appearances for the star, but their biggest magic trick was yet to come in the form of an auspicious marriage between Jackson and the daughter of the King of Rock, Lisa Marie Presley.
He's amazing. I really admire him. I respect him. I admire him. I'm in love with him. And no, we don't sleep in separate bedrooms. Thank you very much.
But in the meantime, the Santa Barbara County Grand Jury, which had spent 3 months investigating the child abuse allegations, disbanded without a decision to indict Jackson. And the Los Angeles County Grand Jury was also soon to follow suit. DA Gil Garcetti knew that without the participation of the primary victim, Jordan Chandler, they wouldn't be able to gain a conviction. Jackson's defense lawyer, Howard Weitzman, would go on to say, "It comes as no surprise that they disbanded without an indictment because there is no evidence." Also interesting to note is that Weitzman was also on O.J. Simpson's defense team temporarily. Anyway, after Jackson settled with the Chandlers in excess of $20 million, the big day would come where the King of Pop would marry the Princess of Rock. And not a moment too soon, only 20 days after Lisa Marie divorced her first husband, Danny Keough. The wedding was a private ceremony in the home of a local magistrate in the Dominican Republic. And what a happy couple they look. My God, I've never seen such love in the eyes of two newlyweds. Just in case you didn't pick up on it, that was sarcasm. But from now on, when Jackson would continue to make his strategic public appearances, his new bride would be attached at the hip, following the megastar hand in hand at all his public engagements while they were swarmed by press. Jackson would now show the world that he was far from the child predator media outlets were calling him. No, he was a normal, red-blooded, heterosexual man, and here was the kiss to prove it.
And just think, nobody thought this would last.
But even with this very tactically planned union, there was still tumult in the Jackson camp. For one thing, LaToya Jackson broke ranks when she would reveal that the matriarch of their family, Catherine Jackson, was well aware of their son Michael's dealings with young boys.
Why then are you so convinced in your heart that he's guilty?
Because of what I've seen, because of what I know, because of what my mother has done, because of what she showed me, because of the things that she said to me about Michael that I refused to believe at the time. I refused to believe my mother. My mother actually was screaming at me one day, and I ran to the room. I thought something was wrong, something had happened, and she was showing me this check. And I said, yes, so what about it? And she says, well, look at it. And the check, of course, was a 1 and lots of zeros behind it. And she says, LaToya, this is $1 million. I said, so? She goes, but look who it's written to. And of course, at that particular time, it was written to the last name of the little boy that he was with all that time. But it was written to the father and not the little boy. It was in the father's name.
LaToya Jackson went on to tell Wiest that Michael would stay alone in his bedroom with children at Havenhurst for days on end, that food trays would be left outside the door by housekeepers.
She said that there were many checks written, that the mother saw the checks and showed checks to LaToya. And then she said she didn't know the year, but there was a boy whose father was a garbage man. And then I have the name Jimmy Safechuck.
According to LaToya, Catherine Jackson was quite the enabler of Michael's deeds, and I'm apt to believe it, seeing as she was already an enabler to Joseph Jackson's physical, emotional, and sexual abuse of his own children, particularly his daughters.
My father would get out of bed with my mother, and he would get into bed with Rebe. And Rebe would ask my mother, please, mother, get help for him. And she wouldn't, she would not. So Rebe had to leave home. The disturbing and hurting part about it all is that my mother never did anything about it.
It seems in the Jackson household, when it came to Michael's affinity for children, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. At first, Michael Jackson seemed to give his mother Catherine almost a saintly image of a mother pleading with her abusive husband not to be so severe with their children.
He would lose his temper. I just remember hearing my mother scream
Joe, you're gonna kill him, you're gonna kill him, stop it, you're gonna kill him.
But I found Katherine Jackson to be quite the manipulator when it came to defending her son with constant gaslighting.
Does your son, Michael, open himself up to criticism at all? Because he admitted in that video, in the Bashir video, that he shares a bed with children. And a lot of people say that's not appropriate.
He didn't say, what he meant is he share his room with them. He sleep on the floor. People get the wrong impression. And if you have a dirty mind, that's how you're gonna think.
Katherine knew that almost the entire Jackson family, with the exception of Janet, was financially dependent on Michael for food, shelter, and clothing.
You claim that the reason your mom is siding with Michael is because your parents and the rest of your family are afraid that they'll be cut off financially from him.
He supports every last one of them. Jermaine lives in that house, his children lives in that house, everybody lives there. He supports them.
According to Bob Jones in his book, The Man Behind the Mask, Michael actually owned their Havenhurst compound and paid all its bills. And woe be unto the Jackson that would cross him. Back in 1991, when Jermaine Jackson wrote a song called Word to the Bad, which would criticize Michael for changing his skin color and alienating his own family, Michael was apparently so enraged by the song that, again, according to Bob Jones, Jackson furiously called his mother and ordered her to oust Jermaine from the family home. You see, Michael owns the compound and pays its bills. Katherine, the family's matriarch, pleaded with Michael. Jermaine had nowhere else to go. By this time, Jermaine and Hazel Gordy had long divorced, and Jermaine no longer had the financial backing of Berry Gordy and Motown. Katherine insisted that Michael and Jermaine talk and make up. But Jermaine learned once and for all that if you cross Michael Jackson, publicly embarrassing him in any way, you are history. Katherine finally persuaded Michael to let Jermaine stay at the Havenhurst estate, but on the rare occasions that Michael would visit the mansion, Jermaine had to make himself scarce. It's no wonder that Jermaine would go on to become one of Michael's most public advocates for his innocence, probably in an effort to win back favor.
Is absolutely not true. My brother is not a child molester, and this is a way for them to continue to make money, and I am very, very upset now. This has got to stop.
It seems, according to Bob Jones' book on the Star, there was a lot of tension and turmoil among the Jacksons towards each other. Michael was very jealous and against any sibling that seemed to have the potential to outshine him. After the second criminal investigation began in 2003 against the pop star, his family met with him at a Las Vegas hotel where he would deny to his siblings and parents the latest allegations against him. But even as Janet had turned up to support her older brother, Michael would scream at her, "You still won't break any of my records, diva. You will never outsell me." A broken-hearted Janet unsuccessfully tried to compose herself as she exited the room in tears. Janet had to be comforted by her older sister Rebe, widely known as the only normal Jackson. Wow, this kind of behavior seems very out of character from what I've been led to believe Michael Jackson was like. Most people, including even his alleged victims, would say that Michael was very gentle, affectionate, and generous, even soft-spoken. But then again, Michael very much distanced himself from his own family and had a particular hatred towards Joe Jackson, which was probably for good reason. So maybe when it came to his family, there was a lot more animosity there. Janet Jackson was also, according to Bob Jones, seen as a threat because, unlike the other Jacksons who relied almost entirely on Michael for financial support, Janet had her own successful career, even close enough to rival her brothers, and in this sense, Michael didn't have the same grip of control on her as he did his other siblings. Anyway, it didn't stop the Jackson siblings from campaigning hard for their brother's innocence. The Jackson family would turn out in full force during the 2005 criminal trial, even ensuring they were color coordinated with their outfits. Katherine would do multiple interviews asserting that Michael was being railroaded by District Attorney Tom Sneddon, even claiming that his son was a Nazi-sympathizing skinhead.
And I hear there's a lot of skinheads down in that area. And there's a lot of, what do you say, Aryan Nation or something. And I hear that Sneddon's son is one.
Who is he most angry with of all this?
I think it's Tom Sneddon, because he knows it's a personal vendetta that Tom Sneddon has against him.
And even LaToya would fall back in line, claiming her ex-husband Jack Gordon was the one who put her up to saying that her brother was a pedophile. LaToya would continue to be one of Michael's most visible advocates even well after the singer's death.
Cochran, who represents Michael, you've seen the attorney Cochran. Well, actually, he threatened my career. He said if I were to say anything else, he would make it a point that my career would be over immediately and I wouldn't be able to work ever again in life.
It would be Michael's youngest brother, Randy, who brokered a deal to hire Jackson's defense lawyer, Tom Mesereau, and he would also arrange for Jackson to be supported and shored up by the Nation of Islam, the black separatist group led by Louis Farrakhan, which was known for espousing anti-Semitic, homophobic, and racist rhetoric, and which would more importantly endorse the view that Jackson was just yet another black martyr being targeted by a racist, white supremacist government jealous of his wealth and success as a world-famous entertainer. Jackson himself would also continually sell this narrative to the press.
But this has been kind of a pattern among black luminaries in this country. I'm handling it by using other people in the past who have gone through this sort of thing. Mandela's story has given me a lot of strength, what he's gone through. The Jack Johnson story and Muhammad Ali's story. All these stories that I can go back in history and read about give me strength, Jesse.
It's interesting how, though Jackson seemed to have a disdain for his own race, he certainly liked to play up his blackness when he needed it. But I digress. Let's move on to Jackson's most crucial enablers, which were the parents. That's right, without the approval and support of these moms and dads, particularly the moms, Jackson would never have had such unfettered access to these kids. And the first enabling mom I want to look at is June Chandler, mother of Jackson's first accuser, Jordan Chandler. Now, June Chandler was a beautiful, multiracial ex-model who hailed from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And let's just say she did have a taste for the soft life. Her ex-husband, Evan Chandler, was a successful Hollywood dentist who even treated the likes of Star Wars actress Carrie Fisher, and who was hopeful to make it in Hollywood as a screenwriter. But June and Evan would divorce in 1985, very shortly after having Jordy. June's next husband would be successful businessman Dave Schwartz, who founded the first and very successful discount car rental, catchily titled Rent-A-Wreck, which eventually, as fate would have it, led them into an opportune relationship with the mega pop star Michael Jackson. Actually, even before their meeting at Dave Schwartz's car rental, it seemed June was eager to strike up a relationship with the star through her son, who was barely a toddler, when first meeting Jackson in a Chinese restaurant. Jackson was immediately smitten with the 4-year-old Jordy, cooing and coddling him as he picked him up, remarking on how cute the boy was. After that, June penned a letter on behalf of Jordy when she heard he had been burned while filming a Pepsi commercial. She delivered the letter herself with Jordy's picture and phone number to one of Jackson's bodyguards at the hospital where the singer was being treated for his injuries. And of course, to June's excitement, Jackson sent her an invitation for Jordy to audition to star with him in the King of Pop's next Pepsi commercial. Jordy in the end wasn't selected, but June would see her big opportunity when Jackson's car broke down on Wilshire Boulevard and her husband Dave dispatched a tow truck and limousine to usher the star to his offices at Rent-A-Wreck. Now, personally, I don't want to come down too hard on these mothers because most of these parents weren't privy to the kind of information we have now. We're living in a post-Me Too, post-Time's Up era where now we know that Hollywood and the entertainment industry in general is rife with predators. I mean, Corey Feldman's been whistleblowing about the epidemic of child trafficking pedophiles in Hollywood for years now. But in the early 90s, before you had things like the internet, before you had things like social media, before you had things like YouTube, and just this explosion of information we now have access to with a click of a mouse, these parents were really walking in blind to what the realities are for people in the industry. I would never think that any of these parents would deliberately and knowingly prostitute their own children to a child molester. I mean, who would do that? But I think they were enamored and seduced by the magnitude of Jackson's fame. This man was literally the most famous celebrity on the planet. And what are the chances of you even meeting someone like that? And when he came across these parents, he absolutely showered them with his wealth, with the glitz and glamour, and these people were completely blindsided by that. And then Jackson gets these parents, particularly the mothers, used to this new lifestyle with private jets and expensive hotels and trips to exotic places. I think by the time he's done wooing them with all that, they don't even want to consider that Michael Jackson may be a child predator. Because if they start to consider that, it means saying bye-bye to this new life you've now gotten accustomed to.
He flies you first class, you have a limo waiting for you at the airport. Amazing. You know, it's a life of the rich and famous. This was all so overwhelming and like a fairy tale. And I got lost in it. And I know my husband got lost in it too.
So I think very easily, once the allegations hit the news, it's a choice of which reality you want to believe. And for these parents, they want the reality where Michael is not a child abuser and they can continue to live the good life. And if I wasn't as informed as I am now, who's to say I wouldn't have had the same short-sightedness these moms had? So with that, let's look at what Bob Jones has to say about June Chandler. He writes in Michael Jackson, The Man Behind the Mask, quote, "What remains incomprehensible to me is how Mother June refused to see a problem with just how close Michael had become to her son. Perhaps she was overly smitten with all the shopping sprees and other expensive gifts Michael was providing her. During their trip to Monaco for the World Music Awards, Jackson and the boy stayed in their hotel suite, with the star claiming they both had colds." Jones goes on to write, "While this was going on, June was off to San Remo shopping. Norma said they didn't need money because they had already been given $5,000 for expensive and clothes for the kids to wear at the upcoming awards show. Michael's wooing of the young boy from Rent-A-Wreck was embarrassing. The cooing, hugging, and holding hands. Many of the hotel staff were whispering things such as, 'They may as well kiss,' or 'Did we miss the wedding?' It was shameful, yet to Michael it was normal behavior. I would later name the trip the honeymoon because it was apparent that Michael Jackson was honeymooning with the boy. They spent their days and nights locked in the hotel suite they shared while June and her daughter kept busy shopping and doing other things. Michael told me to do whatever she wanted, just as long as she stayed away from him and the boy. It was amazingly sad to see that Michael and this little boy were, dare I say it, in love. Was it just Michael's big heart and charitable conscience that kept him holed up with the boy and resulted in showing the kid all this affection? I'll never know, but as I told Michael, it was uncomfortable and unfortunate. Now in Raymond Chandler's book, All That Glitters, this is where I draw the line in sympathy for the parents, because it really seems that at this point, both Evan and June Chandler had a hunch as to what was going on. Chandler writes, "Monique made her position clear several times over the past weeks, but Evan felt she was overreacting, especially when her comments came intertwined with sarcastic remarks about June. Yet after this weird weekend, Evan had to admit that Monique had been more clear-headed than he about what made Michael Jackson tick. Monique reiterated her opinion that Michael was taking up too much of Jordy's life, but this time she offered an additional observation. Jordy doesn't even know you're in the room, Evan. Can't you see what's going on? They're in love." The minute the L word left Monique's mouth, Evan believed she was right. It should have been a dead giveaway, Evan recalled weeks later. When Jordy came walking in the house that night wearing tight black pants, white socks, black loafers, and a black fedora, and Michael came walking in right behind him wearing the same thing, or when they ran off into the living room together after dinner and closed the door behind them, leaving me alone to work on a history paper, or that Michael never once called Jordy by name, referring to him instead by affectionate nicknames like Applehead and Doo-Doo Head. "Do you think it's physical?" Evan asked his wife. "I don't know," Monique answered. "It could just be infatuation, but whatever it is, it's not good for Jordy." "You're right," Evan admitted. "Do you see how different Michael's acting now?" "Oh, absolutely. He took last weekend as some sort of approval. Now he's showing his true colors. I can't believe I didn't see it coming." "Well, June's been encouraging him all along. Now he thinks you are too. What should I do?" Monique pondered a while. "Maybe you should come right out and ask them." "Ask them? Are you kidding? There's no way they'd admit that. Besides, it might do more harm than good right now. Michael thinks he's got me fooled, so he's letting his guard down. I think we should let it play out over the weekend and see what happens." Okay, so here is Evan Chandler now realizing that Michael Jackson might actually be molesting his son. And instead of protecting Jordy from being further victimized by confronting Jackson and ending the relationship, Evan allows this man to continue seeing his son, knowing full well that this might mean he continue having sexual relations with Jordy. And that right there is Evan Chandler enabling Michael's abuse. If you suspected your child might be being molested by a grown man, wouldn't you immediately put a stop to it instead of, quote, letting things play out? It's clear from this, Evan was hoping to catch Jackson in the act so he could have something which would give him leverage over the singer for negotiations. And this is where I see Evan as an opportunist. Oh, my son's being sexually molested by a pop star? Let's see how things play out. I think it's obvious that he saw an opportunity to blackmail Michael Jackson, but he had to make sure he had some kind of proof first. And June isn't much better. Evan goes over to June Chandler's residence, where he sees that Jackson is in Jordy's bedroom, nursing him from an asthma attack. Jordy was sitting up in bed, glued to the TV, unaware that his father had entered the room. As Evan made his way around the end of the bed, Michael, in pajamas and a felt fedora, sprang to his feet. "I'm taking care of him," Michael proclaimed in a booming voice that nearly halted Evan in his tracks. "What are you doing for him?" Evan asked. "I'm giving him his medication and keeping him warm," Michael answered, retreating back to the chair in which he had been keeping his nurse's vigil. As Evan listened to his son's lungs, his eyes perused the toy-laden room and landed with a jolt on the opposite side of the bed. The covers were pulled back as if someone had recently gotten up, and the deep mold of a head remained in the soft pillow. Evan said nothing, but when he was satisfied his son's lungs were clear, he hurriedly left the room to find June. "What the hell is going on in there?" he demanded. "Michael wants to take care of Jordy himself," June said. "He doesn't want me to do it, but it's okay, I showed him what to do." "Don't you think that's a little screwed up? He's our kid, but we're not allowed to take care of him?" "He loves Jordy," June defended. "No shit. Is he sleeping in the bed with him?" "Yes." "Why can't he sleep in Kelly's bed?" "Because that's Kelly's room." "Don't give me that crap. She never sleeps in her bed. She sleeps with you." Realizing that he and June were seconds away from a major blowout, Evan reined in his anger. The following day, Evan went back to June's to insist she kick Michael out and end the relationship. June refused and a nasty argument ensued. It's clear that since Jackson had that talk with June in Las Vegas when she forbid Jordy to sleep in the same bed with him and he gave her a tearful lecture about trusting him, from then on she continued to pander to Jackson's every wish, even allowing him to care for Jordy while he was ill.
Now could you describe for the jury Mr. Jackson's demeanor at the time they came back into the room?
He was sobbing, he was crying, shaking, trembling.
Michael Jackson was?
He was.
And what about your son's demeanor?
He was quiet.
Now at that point in time, did Mr. Jackson tell you why he was upset or crying?
Yes.
All right, tell the jury what he said.
He said, "You don't trust me? We're a family. Why are you doing this? Why are you not allowing Jordy to be with me?" And I said, "He is with you." He said, "But my bedroom, why not in my bedroom? We fall asleep, the kids have fun." And Michael was trembling and saying, "We're family, Jordy is having fun. Why can't he sleep in my bed? There's nothing wrong, there's nothing going on. Don't you trust me?"
Now, another parent I'd like to move on to is Marie Lisbeth Barnes, the mother of Brett Barnes, whose sister revealed during her testimony in the 2005 criminal trial that Brett was allowed to sleep with Jackson for most of 2 concert tours in Europe and South Africa, which each lasted about 6 months. This woman is allowing her child to sleep with this man one-on-one almost for a year. Marie Barnes told Mesereau during questioning, "I had total trust in him. It didn't bother me at all." During the South American tour, Marie told the court that when Brett was 12, herself and her husband had discussed whether their son should be sleeping with Jackson. But she told Mesereau it was only in terms of whether it was an imposition on the star. But it's clear Jackson had almost complete control of this woman. Barnes admitted under cross-examination that she had written a letter to Jackson in 1992 threatening to kill herself because she felt so terrible that she had upset him at one point. I wonder if it was a similar situation as June Chandler's, where she objected to Michael sleeping in bed with her son, only for the pop star to erupt in tears because she didn't trust him. Barnes said it was due to an incident in Paris where they didn't have enough VIP passes for her to attend a concert and she lost her temper. But I wonder if she just contrived that to hide the fact that it may have been due to her questioning the singer about the appropriateness of him sleeping with her son. Then of course there's Joy Robson. In the Leaving Neverland documentary aired in 2019, she claims she had no idea that her son was being abused. But the narrative in Victor Gutierrez's book, Michael Jackson Was My Lover, seems to suggest otherwise. On a summer day in 1992, the author sat down with Joy and she basically told him she had concerns about Jackson's behavior towards her son. Gutierrez quotes Joy as saying, "I told Michael that where my son would go, I would go. Of course, Michael didn't like this. I also told him that I didn't want my son to sleep with him. Wade would stay with me at night, and if Michael wanted to play with him during the day, it would be in a place where I could keep watch. If there was something I learned, it's that I shouldn't have gone against Michael. He was enraged. It was because of this that we left the ranch." Now, the situation that Joy is describing is very reminiscent to what happened when June Chandler voiced her objections to Jackson sleeping with her son Jordy. Jackson also became extremely upset and, according to June, began shaking and crying. And if you think about it, this narrative in Victor Gutierrez's book would definitely match up with Joy Robson's account in Leaving Neverland, where it seemed there was a breakdown in her relationship with Jackson, where Wade was basically replaced by Macaulay Culkin.
It was very obvious to me that Macaulay had taken Wade's place in Michael's best friend category. So that was very hurtful, broke Wade's heart. But it made me realize that if things were going to happen, we have to get busy and do it ourselves.
At that point, it seemed like Wade and Joy were in America on their own without Jackson's financial and influential support. So I wonder if Wade was replaced by Macaulay Culkin because Joy had objected to Jackson sleeping with Wade, something that wasn't mentioned in Leaving Neverland but is mentioned in Gutierrez's book. In Leaving Neverland, it seemed like the dissension happened between Jackson and Joy when Joy refused to leave Wade alone in America with Jackson for a year.
And Michael said to me, "Will you leave little one with me for a year?"
I was on board with this. I wanted to. Are you kidding me? Like, be able to live with him for a year? It was like the most incredible idea I'd ever heard.
I was stunned and said, "Absolutely not." And after it was all over, he looked at me and he said, "I always get what I want." And I said, "Not this time."
But I wonder if that conversation also included Joy's concern that Wade was sleeping in the bed with Michael. Joy goes on to say, according to Gutierrez, quote, "Michael manipulated my son. That was what I didn't like about him. He always made my son feel guilty if he didn't do what he wanted." I interrupted her to ask her the obvious, as I needed to hear her say it. "Manipulate your son? What was it that Michael wanted with a boy like your son?" Joy looked at me. She was upset and disgusted with what I had asked. She said, "I think that both of us know what we're talking about. Michael was obsessed with my son. When I asked him why he wanted to sleep with my son, he replied that we would talk about it later. It never happened." Now, Gutierrez goes on to write that it was shortly after this conversation that the Robsons appeared on TV defending Jackson, and Joy particularly stating why it was okay for a 35-year-old man to sleep in the same bed with her child.
From your standpoint, does it seem unusual for a 34-year-old man to have kids sleeping over?
Not when you know Michael's background. Under normal circumstances, possibly yes. But Michael, everybody knows he didn't have a childhood.
Very contradictory behavior on Joy's part if she in fact had that conversation with Gutierrez. But whatever the case, Joy having her children defend Jackson both on television and in their depositions put her back in the good graces of the pop singer and re-established Wade's place in Jackson's list of special friends.
First hearing that, that he wanted to see me, that he wanted me to come there, felt so good. I'm back. We're coming back together.
When Sandra Sutherland began investigating, she says she met a number of mothers who let their children sleep alone with Michael Jackson.
What did being Michael Jackson's favourite involve for that child?
Well, he got to sleep with Michael in the main house, and the parents and siblings slept in a guest house.
So the deal was, if you're Michael's special child, you sleep in his room?
Yes.
Sutherland says there was sometimes a bizarre competition between mothers to win Michael's attention for their sons.
There were parents whose children were having what they thought was an absolutely wonderful experience, being Michael's special friend, and they also gradually came to realise that their child's time in the sun was very limited. There would come a time after a year or two or three when they would be supplanted by a younger child, and there was a certain discontent among a couple of mothers when they realized that their time was almost up.
So was this a deliberate move by Joy, who knew full well what this might mean for the welfare of her son? Or was this a case of what's called willful blindness when it came to the mothers of all of Jackson's young victims? Now, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, willful blindness is the, quote, deliberate failure to make a reasonable inquiry of wrongdoing despite suspicion or an awareness of the high probability of its existence. So for example, there's evidence of drug use and dealing in your house. You walk around and there are crack pipes on the floor, razor blades, used needles, and the strong smell of ammonia. At this point, a normal person might ask, who's using drugs in my apartment? But for someone engaging in willful blindness, the question is never asked and it's business as usual.
Did you ever lose your trust in Michael Jackson during any point in time that your son was with him?
Never.
Did Mr. Jackson ever do anything that made you suspicious about his behavior toward your son Wade?
Never.
Did Mr. Jackson ever do anything that made you suspicious about his behavior toward your daughter?
Never.
So were Joy Robson and at the very least June Chandler engaging in willful blindness when it came to Jackson's relationship with their sons?
Because it's Michael Jackson and he's a celebrity, people's judgment seems to fly out the window, particularly these parents.
Joy Robson even admitted during the 2005 criminal trial that in a conversation she had with June Chandler, she told June she needed to prepare herself because Jordy's days as Michael Jackson's best friend were numbered.
Do you recall a conversation in which you told June that someday Jordan was going to be replaced by another one of Michael Jackson's friends?
Yes.
And you referred to these people as special friends, correct?
Well, according to my transcript, yes.
You don't ever remember using that phrase now?
No.
But you did use it in your transcript back in 1993?
Yes.
And in a conversation you told June that with these special friends, that when Mr. Jackson moves on to the next special friend, that it has a tremendous emotional impact on the children when they're no longer the favorite, correct?
As does everybody when they lose a friend.
So at the very least, Joy was aware of Jackson's tendency to cycle through boys. According to Raymond Chandler's book, All That Glitters, June Chandler was very uncomfortable with the way Jackson cuddled and kissed Brett Barnes in the limousine as they drove with him to the Neverland Ranch, which is partially why she told her son Jordy never to share a bed with Jackson again. But after Jackson's tearful lecture about love and trust, June threw caution to the wind and was rewarded for her compliance with a jewel-encrusted bracelet from Cartier.
Did you at some point in time relent and allow your son to sleep with Michael Jackson in his bedroom?
Yes, I did.
And was it after that discussion on that night?
Yes.
Now, at some point in time after you had agreed to let your son Jordan sleep with Mr. Jackson, were you the recipient of a gift from Mr. Jackson?
Yes, I was.
Would you describe that to the jury?
It was a gold bracelet, and it was given to me by Michael.
And you say a gold bracelet. Had you seen that gold bracelet in a shop of some kind before?
I had seen it before, yes.
And the brand name of that bracelet?
Cartier.
But in a way, you could say all of Jackson's enablers suffered from willful blindness to some degree. No one had indelible proof that Jackson was sexually abusing his young guests, but there were enough signs to raise a healthy suspicion. And yet no one was bold enough to ask the question that hovered over the minds of almost all of Jackson's employees. As Bob Jones said in his book, The Man Behind the Mask, asking such a question would most likely cost him his job. But there was one person who wasn't under any delusions as to what Jackson's intentions were towards his young male friends, and that was Norma Stakos, otherwise known as the Madam of the Neverland Ranch. If Jackson were comparable to Jeffrey Epstein, then Norma would have been his Ghislaine Maxwell. According to MJFacts.com, Stakos began working for Jackson in 1989 as a ranch manager at Neverland. Initially, Stakos was in charge of workers, maintenance, and the day-to-day running of the ranch. But she quickly rose in the ranks and made herself an essential part of Jackson's staff. Norma had a driving ambition to become the executive vice president of one of Jackson's major corporations, MJJ Productions, and had her hand in most of Jackson's affairs, ranging from his business ventures, his tours and travels, and most importantly, his relationships.
Norma Stakos was a tough broad by any standard. Among the staff who so diligently and loyally served Michael Jackson, she was called, quote, Hitler woman. In her 40s, she was a stocky brunette with a perpetual frown and a way of walking that looked as though she would bowl you over if you didn't move out of her way. Stakos gave absolutely no leeway to anyone and accepted no excuses, ever. She had become one of Michael Jackson's top people at MJJ Productions after having worked for one of Jackson's accountants, and sources inside the office suspected she was preparing a coup of sorts. There was talk of her ambition to be at the top, over Bob Jones, the MJJ Vice President of Communications, a man who had been with Jackson for decades, ever since the family's association with Motown. I was told Stakos made herself indispensable to Michael by casting her tentacles into every conceivable facet of his life. His business ventures, his travel plans, his personal life. She was intent on figuring out exactly what Michael wanted and when, and making it become a reality. Like a hurricane, she cut a swath through the ranks of those who would come anywhere near the boss man, cautioning staff to, quote, never say no to Michael and to never speak directly to any of his guests unless they ask you a question, unquote. Several Jackson employees complained that she acted like everyone's boss when she really wasn't.
According to both Safechuck and Robson's lawsuits, Stakos was the one who orchestrated how, when, and where Jackson would rendezvous with his young friends. And if any employee caused a problem or stood in the way of Jackson's escapades, they would quickly be met with their dismissal. Safechuck's lawsuit states that according to the testimony of Jackson's former maid, Blanca Francia, Stakos would regularly arrange for a limousine to pick up multiple children and take them to Jackson's hideout condo in Century City. And of course, Stakos was regularly in contact with the mothers of these children, arranging for plane tickets and travel to join Jackson on his album tours or to meet him in Neverland. It would also be Stakos who would arrange for parents to be taken on shopping sprees or other such pleasures while their boys would be left alone with a pop star. Stakos had a well-known edict when it came to her boss, and it was never say no to Michael. The ranch manager had a knack for knowing what made Jackson happy and making it happen. And of course, Jackson's main source of happiness was his visits with these kids. In Joy Robson's testimony during the 2005 trial, she complained that Stakos would forbid her from entering the main house on the ranch and had also instructed staff not to talk to her. What really got on Joy's nerves was when during a visit to the ranch in 1990 on Mother's Day, Joy was prevented from seeing her son for the entire day. And Stakos was well aware of why Jackson wanted complete solitude with his young friends. According to Safechuck's lawsuit, Orietta Murdoch, one of Jackson's ranch employees, said shortly after she began working for Jackson in 1989, while Stakos was giving her a tour of the ranch, she stopped near Jackson's bedroom and warned Murdoch to never leave her son alone with Jackson. In fact, Murdoch went on to say in an interview with Diane Diamond in 1994 that Jackson's illicit relations with young boys was common knowledge among the ranch's administrative staff. During Philip Lamarck's testimony during the 2005 criminal trial, Lamarck, formerly a chef at Neverland, said after he witnessed Jackson abusing Macaulay Culkin in the arcade, he didn't report what he'd seen to Stakos as his superior because, according to Lamarck, Stakos already knew. According to Robson's third amended complaint filed in 2015, Stakos allegedly told Orietta Murdoch, "That kid," meaning Jackson, "better be glad I understand his problem." The problem Stakos was referring to was Jackson's predilection for sleeping with young boys. Norma's regular task was organizing the comings and goings of Jackson's little friends, overnighting with the star, and of course procuring several expensive gifts to be bestowed on their willing mothers, so it's very unlikely Staikos would have been ignorant of what these gifts were for and why these children were overnighting with the pop singer. And so it was no surprise when Staikos suddenly took off for Greece after she was subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury when the Jordan Chandler investigation began in 1993. And while she was away, Norma would ask Jackson for money, a lot of it, which of course she knew Jackson would be all too willing to send her, given what she already knew. It was claimed by Jackson's former accountant, Myung-Ho Lee, that Norma appeared to be blackmailing the star. According to Bob Jones in his book, The Man Behind the Mask, he writes, "Every so often, she would leave a message for Michael at MJJ Productions and with his assistant. I need 70,000 or I need 100,000. Whatever the amount requested, it was always sent without question or delay. She's probably been paid millions." And people wonder what happened to all of Michael's money. In fact, Michael's former business manager, Myung-Ho Lee, testified in his lawsuit against Michael that whenever Norma called for money, it was sent to her. Lee, who settled his suit against Michael Jackson in 2002, said Norma was always given money upon request. He speculated that it was to keep her quiet. Eventually, however, Staikos did have to come back to the United States and later returned to California, where she testified for 2 hours before the Santa Barbara County Grand Jury in 1994. But according to investigative journalist Diane Diamond, Staikos would continue receiving large sums of money from Jackson for over a decade. It's possible that since she's been named in Robson and Safechuck's lawsuit, she might just be subpoenaed yet again to give a deposition. And with Jackson long dead, would she now have no reason to keep his secrets? But maybe she still might be tight-lipped, since who knows? Because of her involvement, she might just be held criminally liable for her procurement of Jackson's young friends. Anyway, the long and short of this is Jackson had quite a complex network of moving parts that enabled him to have, as Jimmy Safechuck described, what is likely the most sophisticated public child sexual abuse procurement and facilitation organization the world has ever known. This man had lawyers, publicists, business managers, security, administrative staff, and God knows who else to help him access and abuse dozens, maybe even hundreds of kids right under the noses of their suspecting or unsuspecting parents. This was a multi-million-dollar operation that went on for decades while the singer was alive. Who knows, maybe like Sean P. Diddy Combs, Jackson's corporations MJJ Productions and MJJ Ventures might be investigated under the RICO Act, which stands for Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations. And what about Jackson's Heal the World Foundation? How many vulnerable and at-risk children did this place to star in proximity to under the cover of philanthropy? Much like Jimmy Savile, Britain's most notorious pedophile, whose several investigations revealed he abused hundreds of children across the institutions he worked and volunteered at. Jackson was one man, but through his multi-million-dollar net worth, global influence, and fame, this may be one of the most prolific and celebrated child predators the world has ever seen. But what do you guys think? Do you ever wonder what happened to the rumored suitcase of evidence Anthony Pellicano allegedly took from the Neverland Ranch and Jackson's Century City condo? Who else was in Jackson's network of evil? And do you believe Joy Robson had that conversation with Gutierrez that may indicate she had a suspicion of Jackson's intentions? Let me know in the comments below. And please, if you like this video and want to see more of my content, consider subscribing and even becoming a member, which will help the channel a lot and ensure I'm able to do more of the long-form deep dives you love. I'll see you on the next one. Laters.
Guys, if you haven't joined this channel's membership, then you're missing a lot of good tea with 6 exclusive members-only videos with over 5.5 hours of exclusive content just waiting to be binge-watched. You've got some great analytic videos on Michael Jackson and more, so don't miss out. For just $1.99 a month, you're getting new content weekly. So become a Roxy today and stop missing out on all that great video content. I'll see you guys on the next one. Laters!